It began with a message, simple, unremarkable, and yet the first thread in a web that would eventually strangle a young woman's life. 22-year-old Emily Ward had always been shy, soft-spoken, and introspective. Living with her parents in the seaside town of Dover, England, she spent her days working part-time at a bookstore and her evenings online, sketching, writing, and chatting in the digital spaces where she felt most understood. When she met Ryan Carter in a photography forum, it felt like fate. Ryan seemed perfect, kind, funny, endlessly attentive. His profile showed a handsome man in his mid-20s, a traveler with a love for nature and deep late-night conversations. He always seemed to know the right thing to say, the perfect words to make Emily feel seen. Their conversations grew daily, spilling from chat windows into long emails and constant text messages. Within months, they were inseparable. Ryan told Emily she was the only person who truly understood him. He called her his safe place, his only light. Though they never spoke on the phone, he said he hated his voice, and never met in person. Emily believed him completely. Her friends began to worry. "Doesn't it seem odd?" they asked. "You've never even heard him speak." But Emily brushed off their concern. She felt protective of Ryan, whose stories of trauma and loneliness made her want to care for him even more. He told her he had anxiety, that phone calls triggered panic attacks. She accepted every explanation without question. Over time, Ryan became the center of her world. He grew possessive, demanding constant attention. If she didn't reply quickly enough, his messages turned cold. "Are you ignoring me? I saw you online. You don't love me like I love you." He began isolating her from friends, calling them toxic, insisting they didn't understand their bond. Emily slowly stopped meeting people, convinced that Ryan was the only one who truly cared. Her parents noticed her withdrawing, the once bright, creative young woman now quiet, always checking her phone, her smile replaced with anxious glances at the screen. Still, she insisted everything was fine. "Ryan's helping me be better," she said. "He just worries because he loves me." But what Emily didn't realize was that Ryan Carter did not exist. The man she loved was nothing more than a fiction, a digital ghost crafted by someone much closer than she could ever imagine. The truth was hiding behind a familiar face, in the very same town, waiting for the perfect moment to be revealed. By the time their online relationship reached its first anniversary, Emily Ward had built her life entirely around Ryan Carter. She no longer went out with her friends, rarely spoke to her parents about anything other than work, and spent nearly every evening staring at her phone, waiting for that familiar notification tone. Her world had narrowed to a screen. Ryan's messages had grown more intense, and darker. He often accused Emily of being distant, of talking to other men, even though she barely left the house. If she mentioned going out, he'd reply with guilt-laced words like, "I guess you'd rather be with them than me." When Emily tried to assert herself, Ryan would turn cold, ignoring her for days until she apologized. His control seeped into every part of her life, what she wore, when she went out, who she spoke to. Still, she loved him. At least, she thought she did. Her best friend, Sophie Lane, tried to reach her one afternoon at the bookstore. "You're disappearing," Sophie said softly. "He's not real. You've never met him. Please, just talk to someone." But Emily shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You don't understand. He needs me. He's all I have." Sophie walked away that day feeling helpless. The girl she'd grown up with had been replaced by a shadow. Then, one quiet spring evening, everything changed. After 18 months of endless messages, Ryan suddenly grew distant. His texts became shorter, colder. When Emily asked what was wrong, he told her he was thinking about leaving. She begged him to explain. His final message came just after midnight: "I can't do this anymore. Goodbye, Emily." Hours later, Emily sent one last message, not to Ryan, but to her parents and Sophie, I love you all. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. At dawn, surveillance cameras at Beachy Cliff, a windswept headland known for its dangerous drop, captured her walking alone toward the edge. She paused for a moment, looked out over the ocean, then climbed past the safety barrier. Her phone signal cut out shortly after. The device was never recovered. Neither was her body. The news devastated the small town. Search teams scoured the cliffs and shoreline for days, but found nothing. Emily's parents clung to hope. Maybe she had run away, maybe she'd changed her mind at the last second. But deep down, they knew. It was Sophie who first told police about Ryan. When detectives searched Emily's laptop, they found thousands of messages, long, obsessive exchanges spanning nearly 2 years. Ryan had known everything about her, her fears, her habits, even what time she turned out the light each night. But something didn't add up. The profile photos traced back to a model's public account. The email addresses were untraceable. Every phone number Ryan had used was registered under prepaid SIM cards bought from local convenience stores, all in Dover. That was when investigators noticed something even stranger. Each device had connected from the same IP address, an address belonging to Liam Harper, Emily's childhood friend. He had been part of her life since primary school. Kind, quiet, trustworthy. The boy who once walked her home after class, now the man behind her fabricated lover. When detectives first arrived at Liam Harper's modest flat on St. Peter's Lane, he answered the door calmly, polite, composed, almost relieved to see them. The officers explained that they were following up on Emily Ward's disappearance. Liam nodded and invited them in without hesitation. Inside, the flat was neat, minimal, almost sterile. There were no family photos, no signs of visitors. Just the hum of an aging computer in the corner and the faint smell of coffee. Detective Clara Jennings, who led the investigation, noticed how Liam's hands trembled slightly as he offered tea. "You were close with Emily?" she asked gently. Liam smiled, a small, sad expression. "Yes. I've known her since we were kids. She was special." He claimed they'd drifted apart over the last few years but still texted occasionally. When asked if he knew anyone named Ryan Carter, his expression barely changed. "No," he said. "Never heard of him." But the evidence was already mounting. When police executed a search warrant later that evening, what they uncovered was chilling. On Liam's desk sat 2 mobile phones, one with his own number, and the other linked directly to Ryan Carter. Both had been active until the day Emily vanished. Forensic technicians found dozens of fake email accounts, hundreds of altered photos, and chat logs identical to those on Emily's laptop. He had been both the comforter and the abuser, switching between devices to control every part of her emotional world. Investigators pieced together the cruel precision of it all. Liam had created Ryan from scratch, using stolen images, false stories, and fabricated trauma to bind Emily to him. Every word of affection, every outburst of jealousy, every desperate apology, all came from the same man sitting quietly in that empty flat. When confronted with the evidence, Liam denied everything. He claimed it was an experiment, an online social project that got out of hand. He insisted he never meant to harm Emily, that it had been a game, and that she was free to stop talking to Ryan whenever she wanted. But his lies crumbled quickly. The digital forensics told a darker truth. Messages from his real number to Emily were friendly and supportive, while from Ryan's phone came possessive, manipulative tirades. He had played both sides of her emotional reality, isolating her completely, then tearing her down. Detective Jennings found one exchange particularly haunting. After Emily mentioned wanting to take a short break from social media, Ryan had written, "If you leave me, there's no point in living. You're mine, Emily. Only mine." Liam had typed those words, then sent a comforting message from his real phone just minutes later, "Hey, you okay? Remember, I'm here if you need to talk. It was a perfect circle of control, the false lover who destroyed her, and the friend who offered to help pick up the pieces. Still, the law struggled to define his crime. There had been no financial motive, no physical contact, and, under the laws at the time, no clear statute addressing psychological coercion through deception. The officers could see the manipulation, they could trace every word, but proving criminal intent was nearly impossible. When police asked about the missing devices, the laptop drives and memory cards connected to Ryan's account, Liam hesitated, then admitted he had destroyed them. "I panicked," he said softly. "I didn't want people to think I'd done something bad." To Emily's family, his calm demeanor felt unbearable. Her mother later said, "He spoke as if she were a stranger, as if 18 months of messages were just pixels on a screen." The case soon drew national attention. Newspapers called it the digital lover deception, while commentators debated how someone could be prosecuted for such invisible cruelty. But for Detective Jennings, it wasn't theory, it was the slow, deliberate unmaking of a life. Emily had trusted Liam since childhood. He knew her insecurities, her fears, the exact words that would keep her compliant. He didn't need force, he used love as his weapon. And the law had no name for it yet. The story of Emily Ward's disappearance spread rapidly through Dover and beyond. What had first appeared to be a tragic case of self-harm soon evolved into something far more sinister, a story of manipulation so complete it blurred the line between love and control. Detective Clara Jennings spent long nights reviewing the thousands of messages between Emily and Ryan Carter. What struck her most wasn't just the cruelty, it was the rhythm. Every cycle followed the same pattern: affection, dependence, jealousy, withdrawal, apology. Over and over again. Liam Harper had built a psychological cage and convinced Emily to lock herself inside it. When the truth emerged publicly, the shockwave was immediate. Friends who'd grown up with Liam couldn't believe it. He'd always been quiet, almost painfully polite, the kind of man who offered to fix a neighbor's fence or help carry groceries. But behind that mask had lived something colder, an obsession with control, disguised as affection. Emily's parents, David and Claire Ward, were broken by grief. They sat through every police briefing, every update, clinging to the hope that justice might follow. But with no body and no law to define his manipulation as a crime, prosecutors struggled to find grounds for charges. "It's not stalking," one official told them gently. "He didn't threaten her, and there's no financial exploitation. The law doesn't quite cover this." To Claire Ward, that sounded like a failure to see her daughter's pain. "He made her believe she wasn't worth anything unless he approved of her," she told reporters. "He erased her from her own life." Public outrage followed. Commentators called for change, arguing that emotional coercion online should carry legal consequences. But as debates filled the airwaves, Liam Harper remained a free man. Police surveillance captured him walking through town alone, head down, avoiding cameras. He had deleted his social media accounts, moved out of his flat, and claimed he wanted to rebuild. Yet whispers followed him everywhere. In cafes, in shops, people would fall silent as he passed. He seemed almost invisible, and that suited him fine. But inside the police archives, Emily's digital life told the truth. In her final weeks, Ryan's tone had become suffocating. He accused her of flirting, of lying, of planning to abandon him. When she didn't respond quickly enough, he sent lines that chilled even seasoned detectives: "If I can't have you, no one should. You make me feel crazy, but I love you too much to let go." Then, just before she vanished, "You'll miss me when I'm gone. Or maybe I'll miss you more." Detective Jennings printed that final message and stared at it for a long time. It wasn't only Emily who'd been disappearing, Liam had been too, swallowed by the lie he'd built. A digital forensics expert later revealed how meticulous he had been. Every message was timestamped to align with his own daily schedule. When Liam went to work, Ryan would be offline. When Liam had dinner, Ryan would send pictures of food, pretending to eat at the same time. It was a performance, seamless, terrifyingly human. Still, there was something that haunted Jennings. Why? Why would someone do this to a person they claimed to care about? When she asked Liam directly during one of the last interviews, he said quietly, "I just wanted to be loved without being rejected." Ryan could be perfect. I couldn't. The simplicity of his answer chilled her more than any confession could. Meanwhile, the Ward family refused to let Emily's story fade. They wrote to Parliament, to advocacy groups, to anyone who would listen. Their campaign soon drew national coverage, calling for a formal inquest to recognize digital coercion as a contributing factor in deaths like Emily's. Nearly 2 years after she vanished, the coroner granted their request. The hearing would determine not only what had happened to Emily, but whether the law had failed her completely. And for the first time, Liam Harper would have to face the consequences, if not in a courtroom, then in the harsh light of truth. The coroner's court of East Kent was packed on the morning of the inquest. The air inside was heavy, charged with the weight of expectation and quiet grief. Reporters filled the back rows. Emily Ward's parents sat at the front, holding hands, pale but composed. A framed photograph of Emily, smiling, eyes full of life, rested on the table before them. Across the room sat Liam Harper. He looked smaller than anyone remembered, his once neat hair now unkempt, his suit hanging loose on his frame. He didn't look up once as the proceedings began. Coroner Margaret Bell, a calm but sharp woman with decades of experience, opened the hearing with measured words. "This case," she said, "is not only about loss, but about the boundaries of human manipulation in a digital world." Over 3 days, the court heard every detail of Emily's descent, from her first messages with Ryan Carter to her final steps at Beachy Cliff. Detective Clara Jennings presented the evidence first. She spoke clearly, her tone steady but edged with quiet anger. She described the dual phones, the mirrored accounts, and the endless cycle of control and apology that shaped Emily's final year. Screenshots filled the court's monitors, texts where Ryan showered Emily with affection, followed by tirades of jealousy and guilt. One message silenced the room entirely: "You make me whole, Emily. Without you, I'm nothing. Don't ever make me feel empty again." Jennings paused before continuing. "This message," she said, "was sent from the same IP address as one written minutes later from Liam Harper's personal phone. You okay? You've been quiet today." The pattern was undeniable. Liam had orchestrated both comfort and control, creating a cycle of dependency that no 22-year-old could have seen through. Digital forensic experts confirmed that over 8,000 messages were exchanged during the relationship, all generated by Liam. When asked why he had used 2 phones, Liam replied softly, "I needed both to keep the illusion alive." Throughout the testimony, he sat motionless, staring at the table, occasionally pressing his thumb into his palm, the only sign of tension. Then came the most painful moment, Claire Ward's statement. Her voice shook, but her words were resolute. "My daughter thought she'd found love. She found control. She thought someone cared for her. Instead, she was studied, like an experiment in breaking a soul." Her husband, David, added quietly, "If a person can be driven to hopelessness through lies, that should matter in law." Because it mattered to her. Liam's defense counsel emphasized again that there had been no physical harm, no direct threat, and no intent to cause Emily's death. It was deception, not coercion, he argued. Tragic, yes, but not criminal. But the coroner disagreed. In her closing statement, Margaret Bell's voice was steady, her gaze fixed on Liam. "What we see here is not mere deception. It is sustained psychological domination. Mr. Harper constructed a reality in which Miss Ward's emotions, thoughts, and choices were no longer her own. The result was catastrophic. She ruled that Emily Ward's death was the result of self-inflicted actions under the influence of sustained digital coercion and emotional abuse. For the first time, official documentation recognized that online manipulation, even without physical contact, could destroy a life. The ruling didn't carry criminal penalties, but its symbolic weight was immense. Advocacy groups hailed it as a turning point. Newspapers called it a modern tragedy born in the age of screens. Outside the courthouse, the wards faced a wall of cameras. Claire held back tears as she said, "We can't bring Emily back. But maybe the next family won't have to go through this. Maybe someone will finally see the warning signs before it's too late." Liam Harper left through a side door, escorted by police. Though no charges were filed, his reputation was in ruins. He had lost his job, his friends, and the anonymity he once hid behind. As he disappeared from view, the crowd outside fell silent, not out of sympathy, but disbelief. The man who had pretended to love someone to death now walked free, while the woman who truly loved him was gone. The inquest had ended. But the fight for change had only just begun. Months passed after the inquest, but in the quiet streets of Dover, Emily Ward's story refused to fade. Her name became a symbol, a haunting reminder of how love, when twisted by deception, could become something unrecognizable. The Wards poured their grief into purpose. With the support of advocacy groups and members of Parliament, they launched the Emily's Law campaign, pushing for legislation that would criminalize sustained emotional control and digital manipulation. They spoke in schools, at universities, on television panels, not out of vengeance, but conviction. Claire Ward became the quiet but unshakable voice of the movement. "Technology has given people new ways to connect," she told a crowd in London, her voice steady. "But it's also given predators new ways to control. My daughter's story should remind us that words can wound, and that control doesn't need chains to destroy a person." Meanwhile, Liam Harper retreated into isolation. His name was whispered online, his image used in articles about catfishing and digital abuse. He moved from Dover to a neighboring town, changed jobs frequently, and lived in near-total seclusion. Former friends described him as hollow, detached, a man walking inside a silence of his own making. In one brief interview requested by a documentary filmmaker, he offered only this: "I didn't mean for it to end that way. I just wanted to be loved." The filmmaker noted the absence of remorse in his tone, not pride, not guilt, only emptiness. Detective Clara Jennings, now promoted to chief inspector, continued to cite Emily's case during law enforcement training sessions on cyber coercion. "You can't fingerprint words," she would say, "but they leave marks all the same." 3 years after Emily's death, the family's campaign succeeded. A new amendment was passed in Parliament recognizing digital coercive control as a form of emotional abuse, punishable under domestic and cybercrime statutes. It wasn't called Emily's Law officially, but in newsrooms and community halls across the country, that's what people called it anyway. The Wards didn't celebrate. They simply stood together on the cliffs where their daughter had last been seen, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. The sea below crashed against the rocks, cold and endless. Claire whispered, "It's done, sweetheart. They heard you." She let the flowers fall into the wind and watched as they drifted out toward the horizon. Back in town, a mural appeared near the bookstore where Emily once worked, her face surrounded by words that read, "You are not alone. Speak before silence takes you." Every morning, passers-by would see it, some pausing to reflect, others leaving small notes beneath it, names of loved ones, messages of hope, pleas for understanding. For Detective Jennings, that mural was a reminder of how invisible harm could become visible if enough people were willing to look. For the Wards, it was proof that Emily's life, though short, had changed something vast. As for Liam Harper, he vanished from public view entirely. His name slowly faded from headlines, replaced by new cases, new debates. But his legacy, the digital ghost he created, lingered in every warning talk, every law reform, every parent teaching their child to trust wisely. The story of Emily Ward became more than a tragedy. It became a lesson, One carved into modern history, reminding the world that control doesn't always come with violence, and that love, when manipulated, can be as dangerous as hate. And somewhere in the crash of the sea against the cliffs, it said that the wind still carries her name, soft, mournful, but unbroken. Emily.